All right, let me take you through this story, one that starts off with an elegant woman frozen in her first-class seat, cheeks burning with humiliation as a flight attendant towers over her, wearing that kind of condescending smile you see when someone thinks they're totally in control. "Ma'am, we need this seat for another passenger," he says, completely unaware that the trembling phone in her hand is already connected to her son's voicemail. Now here's the kicker: this isn't just any passenger. This is Eleanor Johnson, mother of Elijah Johnson, the largest shareholder in this airline. And yeah, in less than 24 hours, none of these airline staffers will have their jobs. But before we dive into the juicy details of how one woman's quiet dignity led to an entire company's shakeup, tell me, where are you watching from right now? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed unfair treatment on public transport, and subscribe to join the fight against injustice. So Eleanor Johnson wasn't a stranger to discrimination. At 78, this retired schoolteacher from Birmingham, Alabama, had lived through segregation, the civil rights movement, and a lifetime of being told she didn't belong. Her hands weathered, but steady had graded thousands of papers over her 40-year teaching career, instilling dignity and grace into generations. Her pride, though, was her son Elijah, who at 52 had built himself from studying by candlelight in a house without electricity to becoming the billionaire CEO of Phoenix Technologies. Yeah, that happened. Elijah started with a tiny software company in his garage. Now his empire employs over 10,000 people nationwide, worth over $4 billion, making him one of America's most successful black entrepreneurs. But despite his success, Elijah never forgot his roots. For 15 years, it was tradition to take an annual trip to Martha's Vineyard with his mom, flying private jet from New York to Massachusetts. This year, though, an emergency board meeting forced a change. "I'm sorry, Mom," he told her during their Sunday call. "I can't send the jet, but I booked you the best first-class seat on Meridian Airways. Those new reclining pods, you'll love them." Eleanor shrugged off the change. "Son, I've spent most of my life on Greyhound buses. First class on any airline is luxury to me." What Eleanor didn't know was that Elijah's company had just invested $200 million in Meridian Airways, becoming the airline's largest minority shareholder. This wasn't just a business move. It was part of Phoenix Technologies' diversification plan, and Elijah was impressed with Meridian's growth and customer service. On the day of the flight, Eleanor arrived early, dressed immaculately in a powder blue suit, matching shoes, and her favorite pearl necklace gift from her late husband. She approached the premium check-in counter, boarding pass and ID ready. Lisa Parker, the young gate agent, smiled politely at first, but the warmth quickly disappeared when she saw Eleanor. "How can I help you?" Lisa asked, her tone suddenly cooler. Eleanor responded warmly. "Good morning. I'm checking in for the first-class flight to Martha's Vineyard." Lisa's eyebrows shot up. "First class? Let me see your boarding pass." Eleanor handed over the documents, keeping her smile, even as skepticism hung thick in the air. Lisa whispered in her phone, "I have an unusual situation at check-in," glancing back at Eleanor. Meanwhile, flight attendants Brandon Thompson and Meredith Wilson observed nearby. Brandon nudged Meredith, whispering, $10 says she's in the wrong line." Meredith just nodded, probably confused. After a long verification, Lisa handed back Eleanor's boarding pass. "Everything looks in order, Mrs. Johnson. Though first-class seats are usually for regular customers." Eleanor smiled gently. "My son made the reservation. He said it'd be comfortable. I'm sure it will be." Lisa's smile felt forced as she said, "Boarding begins in 90 minutes at gate 12. As Eleanor walked away, she overheard Lisa's colleague mutter something about probably her employer's ticket. At security, Eleanor was pulled aside for extra screening while others passed freely. The TSA agent peppered her with questions. "Did you pack your own bag? Has anyone given you anything?" Eleanor held her composure, though a familiar heaviness settled in her chest, the weight of being seen as other yet again. Soon, she was among the first aboard. Meredith, the flight attendant at the door, checked Eleanor's boarding pass and did a double take at seat 1/8 premium first-class window seat. Eleanor confirmed politely, Yes, that's right. Meredith's smile tightened as she directed her forward. The first-class cabin was sleek, with just 8 premium pods. Eleanor settled in, the soft leather seat feeling like a world away from the buses she'd known. Champagne was offered, but she chose water instead. The flight was running late, waiting on VIP passengers. Eleanor pulled out her Buka biography of Harriet Tubman and tried to relax. Other passengers shot curious glances her way. A sharply dressed businessman looked twice, then checked his boarding pass as if doubting where he was. Then, 40 minutes later, a commotion at the cabin entrance caught her attention. Charles and Vanessa Whitfield, wealthy regular first-class flyers, arrived, greeted warmly by Brandon. Charles's gaze stopped on Eleanor. He whispered to Brandon, "There seems to be a situation." Brandon leaned close, casting looks toward Eleanor's seat. Moments later, he approached her, voice polite but firm. "May I see your boarding pass again, ma'am?" Eleanor handed it over calmly. "Is there a problem?" Brandon studied it too long before replying. "There's been a computer error. You'll need to move." Eleanor's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "My boarding pass shows seat 1A. I'm settled here." Brandon's tone grew condescending. "These seats are for our platinum members. We have a seat for you in economy." Nearby passengers watched, some uncomfortable, others smug. Eleanor said quietly, "I don't have platinum status. My son purchased this seat. I intend to stay." Brandon's smile tightened. "Ma'am, you'd be more comfortable in the back. This section has expectations." The implication was clear as day. Eleanor felt humiliation but refused to show it. "Unless it's a safety issue, I'll stay." Charles Whitfield cleared his throat loudly. "Some of us have connections. Can we move this along?" Brandon called the gate agent. Then security arrived with the gate supervisor. "Mrs. Johnson, please gather your things. We can't delay the flight." Eleanor's voice was steady. "Why me? I have a confirmed seat." The gate supervisor muttered about company policy and operational considerations. Across the aisle, a white woman in her 40s, Diana Morris, spoke up. "That's strange. I've flown first class on this airline dozens of times, never heard of seat reassignments for weight distribution." She quietly recorded the scene on her phone. Eleanor maintained calm. "I'm a paying customer. I want to stay." Brandon's professional mask cracked. "These seats cost thousands, reserved for premium customers." Eleanor asked softly, "Are you suggesting I can't afford this seat or don't belong here?" The question hung unanswerable. Security Officer Troy Baker stepped forward, hand near his taser, implicit threat clear. "Ma'am, crew has final authority. Please comply or deplane." Eleanor's eyes scanned the cabin. The humiliation was familiar and fierce. At 78, she wasn't physically up for removal, nor did she want to reinforce stereotypes. Quietly, she began packing. "I'll move, but I want it noted I was removed without valid reason." Diana stood. "I'm an attorney. This isn't right." She handed Eleanor her card. "I'll send you the video." Brandon quickly reassured the Whitfields their seats were ready 1A or 1B. The arrogance left Eleanor speechless. Troy took her carry-on and led her to a middle seat in economy, despite empty window and aisle seats. Passengers on either side offered theirs to Eleanor, but she declined. "This isn't your burden." Elijah finally answered her call, just before electronic devices had to be switched off. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Just a seating issue," she downplayed. "They moved me from first to economy." Elijah's voice sharpened. "They what? Why? Were they white?" "Yes," Eleanor admitted, "but I have to go." Elijah promised to call after landing and to handle it. As the plane took off, Eleanor settled into cramped discomfort, knees aching, a far cry from first-class luxury. She endured, remembering standing on segregated buses, choosing dignity over comfort. An hour into the flight, Diana returned, kneeling beside Eleanor. What happened was unacceptable. Eleanor smiled gently. "I've been through worse." Diana handed her the business card again, promising to share video evidence. Other economy passengers overheard and expressed sympathy. Nicole Bennett and Thomas Richards, seated nearby, introduced themselves. They shared their own stories, offering kindness that helped ease Eleanor's burden. Suddenly, turbulence hit, rattling the cabin. Charles Whitfield loudly complained about the pilot, while Vanessa demanded more champagne, ignoring the seatbelt sign. Passengers whispered about Eleanor's ordeal, some mentioning her son, Elijah, John's own a self-made billionaire tech CEO. As the plane descended, Eleanor felt a mix of emotions, humiliation tempered by kindness and pride. Brandon made a final check, ignoring Eleanor entirely. The plane landed gently. As passengers deplaned, Eleanor prepared for the final indignity, walking past the first-class cabin she'd briefly occupied. But at the terminal, Elijah was already waiting, flanked by grim-faced executives. "Mom," he said, embracing her gently. "Are you okay?" "Tired but fine." Before questions could follow, Diana showed Elijah the video. Other passengers gathered to offer witness statements. Charles and Vanessa Whitfield emerged laughing but froze at the crowd and Elijah. Brandon and Meredith followed nervously. Elijah's gaze was icy. Robert Campbell, CEO of Meridian Airways, arrived, offering apologies and promising investigations. Elijah publicly called out the airline's racism, presenting video proof and eyewitnesses. Charles Whitfield tried to downplay his role, but Elijah held him accountable. Brandon tried to defend himself, but was exposed as prejudiced. Security officer Troy admitted he'd followed orders blindly. Meridian's leadership promised reform, but Elijah insisted on transparency and immediate consequences. He demanded terminations, suspensions, and structural changes, threatening to divest Phoenix Technologies' $200 million stake. The situation exploded on social media, the video going viral with over 5 million views. Meridian's stock plunged, and Charles Whitfield was placed on leave. The public pressure forced swift action. In the airport VIP lounge, Eleanor spoke calmly about justice, compassion, and the need for education alongside accountability. She called for transformation, not just punishment. Her son echoed her sentiment, pushing for meaningful, systemic change. Meridian Airways agreed to a comprehensive diversity initiative, including bias training, revised policies, and new executive roles focused on inclusion. Eleanor was invited to consult, her wisdom as a lifelong educator invaluable. Months later, Eleanor returned to Birmingham International Airport for another flight, this time greeted warmly and treated with respect. The airline's culture had shifted. Flight attendants recognized her. Passengers acknowledged her impact. Her story sparked broader discussions across industries. Elijah launched initiatives to increase minority leadership. A class action lawsuit settled with compensation and reforms. Eleanor's dignified stand had rippled outward, creating waves of change. As she and Elijah watched the sunset on Martha's Vineyard, she reflected on the journey from segregated buses to boardrooms, from exclusion to empowerment. Sometimes, she said softly, God puts you in the wrong place so you can help make it right for others. And that's exactly what happened in Seat 1A on a Meridian Airways flight, a lesson in dignity, justice, and the power to transform. So now I ask you, have you ever witnessed discrimination in public? What did you do? Would you have stood your ground like Eleanor, or quietly moved to avoid conflict? Drop your thoughts below. If this story resonated, hit like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to understand that real change starts with standing up calmly, firmly, and with heart. Because sometimes the strongest response to injustice isn't anger, it's dignified determination to create lasting transformation.